Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Vedic Astrology podcast. My name is Fiona Marks, and it's a joy for me to be here with you today. One of the things that has caught my interest in Vedic astrology ever since I was a student is the balance of masculine and feminine that's in the teachings of Vedic astrology. So I have always wanted to sit down and just tease apart some of that equilibrium, how it's distributed in Vedic astrology, and more broadly, how it's distributed in philosophy and yoga and Ayurveda. And a very dear colleague of mine came to mind. And so today I have with me Nandini, who I met more than 20 years ago when she led me in a feminine yoga practice. So can I ask you to say hello to all of our listeners?
Hi, Fiona. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Can I ask you to share a little bit about this journey that began very young, that travels many miles and many cultures? What is it that has brought you to this place of helping women connect with their feminine spirit?
I think it started when I was actually very young, at a very young age. I didn't feel happy in my home, and there was a lot of dysfunctional behavior that made me feel really unvalued. I was really yearning for this all-encompassing love, that embracing energy of the mother, of the feminine. I had this in my heart without being able to actually name it, but my heart was yearning for that. I could see things that were not aligned, and I felt that this energy of all-encompassing love was missing. So I unknowingly went on a quest to find how could I experience that within myself. And so one day I was fortunate to come across a four-letter word that is now so well known in the world. But in my little island in Tahiti, where I come from, where I was born and where I grew up, it was not known. It was even considered a sect. That word is simply yoga. So I was walking in my town in Papeete, and I think at the time there were two yoga teachers. I was 14 years old, and I just saw this word, yoga, and something resonated in me. I felt a calling. I didn't know what it was, but I felt a calling, like a magnet. And I went into this shabby building. So I went up the stairs, and when I arrived, I opened the door. It was a different space. It was clean and it was bright and there was light. And there was this little woman, a tiny little woman there behind her desk. And I inquired and I booked in for my first class. And I was so lucky because I don't want to say I didn't just find yoga because yoga is huge in itself. It's not just the physical yoga posture and all that. It's a very vast body of knowledge that is deeply rooted in wisdom and also in science and philosophy. But also I found the right teacher for me, and she just imparted all her knowledge about the feminine, all that I was yearning and searching for. She taught it to me. She took me under her wing, basically. I started reawakening all these pathways within myself, starting to experience the feminine within me. Because when you are in an environment that is harsh and critical, and you don't feel embraced for who you are and valued, you become hard. You close your heart. You don't feel anymore. You try to protect yourself, and the joy cannot flow. So little by little, I released those layers so I could access that joy again.
Maybe we romanticize Tahiti and this idea of island living, and then tell us what the contrast is to arrive in Australia, and how did that shape your journey and what you do now?
So when I first arrived, I was very excited to be in this culture, but also I felt there was such a big difference between the women and me, and I couldn't figure out what it was initially. I remember an incident that is very trivial, but I think that's quite revealing. I was walking in the campus and I was stopped by, it was a guy who stopped me and said, "Oh, where are you going dressed like that?" And I thought, dressed like what? I said, "I'm going to the supermarket." But so I was dressed the same way I would be dressed in my country, in Tahiti. But for Australia, it was like I was dressed up. And that was my first, that's interesting. But later on, yes, I realized that there was, I was being misunderstood for who I was as a woman. There were two things. First, by this point, I had awakened different feminine pathways that could have been dormant. And on top of that, I came from a culture, the Polynesian culture, that is feminine, that integrates the feminine. So that also means sensuality, sexuality, expression, emotions, receptivity, intuition. And that's how I was living my life. And I came into this culture that does not naturally recognize that. So I was feeling, what is it? There's a certain kind of rigidity, a certain kind of, I felt people had walls. I didn't find that women dressed very well, to be honest. They didn't use colors. There was a lot of black. I didn't expect women to wear flowers in their hair like we do in Tahiti. It's a different culture. But, I didn't feel this joy of life, joie de vivre. And mostly women were not inhabiting their bodies. Everything was up in the head. So guys thought that they think I'm after them. I wasn't at all. I had a boyfriend. I totally wasn't. But because they're not used to this energy, they make interpretations. Women were jealous of me. And later on, I figured out they're jealous because that's what they want. I'm saying all this without any judgment, with a lot of compassion and understanding. So after I realized all this, I did something that perhaps is natural when you arrive in a country that is foreign and you want to fit in. I put all that aside. I shut off everything completely to fit in. That's how much I wanted to fit in, right? I don't do this anymore. I've learned my lesson. But it was a good experience because, I learned through experience and to feeling and embodying what others are feeling. And without that, I couldn't have understood people properly, and I wouldn't be able to teach how the way I am teaching now, because I have an experiential knowing of it. So I shut off everything and I just became blah. And then I became sad and inspired and not creative, and I'd lost my joy, and it wasn't fun. But I was fitting in, but I wasn't happy. And one day I realized what's going on? And then I realized what I did to myself. And then I had to find again a more integrated way. And then after that, that's when I started my women's programs. So when women started reconnecting with the feminine part of themselves and allowing themselves to reconnect with that part, they felt joyful, they felt radiant, they felt less tired, their partners were more attracted to them. They started having more intuition, seeing the benefit it made me want to continue, even though it's not easy because the structure to offer this kind of work wasn't there. So I found my way in the jungle.
In the concrete jungle. I'm smiling as Nandini is speaking because I met Nandini in my hometown. It really helps me tap into my corporate self. Like, we were all wearing suits and shoulder pads and high heels. And in order to be successful in that town, as a woman, you need to be a man. So I can imagine someone floating along the street in a flowing skirt and some color would just be absolutely revolutionary or, riotous, confronting. So I have a good giggle as you were sharing all of that. And tell us now where you are. So you run a center for women, or tell us about what it is you actually do now.
I'm online mainly, and I coach women. I coach women from different parts in the world, and particularly women in the Middle East. I coach some women locally. So I help women reconnect with her feminine in different ways. So it's very tailored. And I run yoga classes, I run women's events, I run women's circles. And just recently I've collaborated with a bunch of 30 women on a book. And the book is going to be released soon. The book is called She Is. Women share their stories around the feminine and how they came to it.
So this is why I wanted to sit down with Nandini today, because I'm very interested in the beautiful integration of masculine and feminine that is embedded or inherent in Vedic philosophy. And at the same time, I notice that, of course, these ancient traditions are passed down. And a little bit like Chinese whispers, the cultural element of whatever's happening in the world at that time gets woven into the sharing of this ancient tradition. And sometimes I find that yoga and Vedic astrology and sometimes Ayurveda, we notice that maybe it's been masculinized, and it's good to reflect on how to highlight the feminine that's truly there, balanced and equal in this ancient tradition. So that's what we're going to tease apart today. I haven't invited Nandini as a Vedic astrologer. So I'm going to bring the Vedic astrology side, and we're just going to talk about different elements of masculine and feminine. Also because Nandini has a very rich cultural background as well, because not only growing up in Polynesian culture and spending time in Australia, but genetically or culturally, your heritage is also rich, isn't it?
Yes. Lebanese on my father's side and Spanish, Italian on my mom's side.
Yeah, so we've got like a really good melting pot, and different cultures really bring different strengths to the masculine feminine, like a different balance, and they highlight some bits and they repress other bits. So it's great to have different cultural backgrounds.
Absolutely. And often I hear, especially in the kind of feminine empowerment movement in connection with yoga, that yoga was made by men for men. I've always found this line very attractive as a female practitioner to give myself a reason to do yoga in a different way. But despite the fact that on a marketing level, I'd say it's very convincing. I've always had a feeling it wasn't completely true. There's some truth and some non-truth about it, because there was a time indeed where women were integrated. In the very ancient Vedic age, women were integrated. Women were part of it. Women had a special place. They were honored, and they had the same opportunities, as men. But later on, it changed. And the question as to when it changed is, there's a lot of contradictory information out there. Some say it's when the Brahmin came. Some say it's when there was a Muslim invasion or the British colonization, that this whole culture that was honoring women changed. I can't say when it changed, but it changed. And a lot of things that were natural in women became suppressed. Even just, women's cycles were associated with dirt and impurity. And it still is the case in different culture, including in India. But initially it was not like that in the Vedic times. But what we know is that it's a very, very, very ancient culture, a civilization that included women in a beautiful way. But it did change. And I think those changes had an impact on absolutely everything, including yoga.
Absolutely. And this is what I'm also drawn to as well, because I think what you're saying about yoga, that it's by men for men, as you say, it's kind of attractive for modern women. We can reclaim yoga in the way that we want to. But we can say that about Vedic astrology as well, that it has been preserved by men for men, that it was used in a priestly context. Often the amount of attention that is required to really analyze someone's chart, you can only do that for royalty. It's that kind of investigation that's required. So the preserving of this tradition becomes for an elite in a way, and following that male tradition, and therefore the combinations that you see in the chart and what they mean and what would be auspicious for a man, and that should be kind of cultivated in that chart as important, perhaps has been culturalized to be more masculine because it's just been passed through that line. Anyway, that is what, as you're saying, yoga by men for men, we can sometimes say that in some ways Vedic astrology is like that it's been preserved by priests for men because of the way culture evolved. However, I agree with you that the actual knowledge of Vedic astrology, the thisness of what Vedic astrology is, it's not gender specific in any way. It's about life, and so I'm really interested in where we can see the cultural elements that have perhaps seeped in, and where we can see that pure balance that's there. And one of the things that jumps out at you straight away, I think, when you start learning Vedic astrology, masculine and feminine are very clearly delineated and defined and made visible in the chart. For example, we have the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 rashis, and six of them are masculine and 6 of them are feminine. So we kind of know straight away that even if we think of the rashis as being the field within which all life and karma is fertilized and occurs, those fields, half of them are masculine and half of them are feminine. So we see the intention straight away. Those feminine signs are Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Pisces. And each of those signs being female means that field, that fertile space of life to seed the karma that the being is going to experience, Those 6 fields, they're more receptive, as you already mentioned. They're more open. They represent the back of our body. When we think of where they will show up on the body, they represent the left side of the body and the negative polarity rather than positive. And you'll notice that half of them are earth signs, right? We've got Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are all feminine earth signs. So we already feel this connection to fertility and to life, to groundedness through the female signs. And then Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces are water signs, which is another feminine quality. We associate this movement and flow with women. So as soon as you start, this is the very first thing you learn when you're exposed to Vedic astrology. And front and center is this idea that half of life is masculine, half is feminine, and the association of women with earth and with water. And by associating them with earth and water, we're also linking them to those paths of the Artha path and the Moksha path. So I found, that really beautiful that all of these fields, half of them are feminine, and in some ways we think of the toughest field that there is, Capricorn, the earth sign, the 10th sign, the hardest sign of hard work, and it's a feminine sign, which is another thing that I love about Vedism, whatever we're going to call this word, is that the goddesses, that the stories that come to us there are sensual goddesses and there are joyful and light goddesses, but there are also really grounded, they deal with stuff, like they resolve problems, they end conflicts, they bring an end to violence and inauspicious times. So I love that right here, just in the 12, we haven't even talked about planets. We're just talking about signs. We can already feel the power of the feminine.
And as you said, they all have their different flavors, their different aspects. They're just like goddesses, goddesses, goddesses that represent different archetypal energies.
And now in Vedic astrology, all of the female rashis belong to the moon and all of the masculine rashis belong to the sun, because really the sun and the moon are the parents of all of the experience that we're having here on planet Earth. So I also love that connection that the zodiac is not about the sun. We call it our sun signs, but it's half belongs to the sun and half belongs to the moon. And then the moon delegates all of these signs to different planets. So while the moon owns Cancer and keeps that sign, it delegates Virgo to Mercury. It delegates the sign of Scorpio to Mars, the sign of Capricorn to Saturn, the sign of Pisces to Jupiter, and the sign of Taurus to Venus. So each planet is given by the moon a feminine sign. Even the masculine planets receive a feminine sign, and equally the sun delegates to all of the planets a masculine sign. So it's again showing that it's about equilibrium. It's about being comfortable both in the negative polarity and the positive polarity.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you have too much of one or too much of the other, there's no integration and balance. But unfortunately, we've got too much masculine in our world. So that's why we've got all these movements of the feminine in so many different areas of life to recalibrate, to rebalance. And just even the COVID situation, it's forced everyone to slow down so slowing down, this is, that's a feminine thing, to slow down. We've been forced to be more introspective and to look at our lives and how we do things, and time to be more than time to do, time to look at what we're doing, and perhaps even that meant resting more for some, and we need that, It's part of the balance. It's part of the balance. It's part of the gestation, just like a seed planted in a fertile soil needs to gestate to grow, or just like the child in the womb, and that's all this time. This is patience. This is being in the dark, in the fertile soil, in the mystery, in the unknown. And that is the feminine, again, that we are constantly trying to escape by being busy all the time, by also ignoring what we need to feel, and by doing that, missing our calling. In the fierceness of the current situation, there is a gift. I see that as Mother Kali, the goddess Kali. That fierce goddess who is so in love with truth that she would just do anything for truth to prevail, really. And I feel this is the medicine that we are needing, and that we are receiving. And if we receive it, we're going to come out of it. We can blossom. We can open up like a flower. I always love the analogy of the flower. But if we fight it, if we don't learn, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Would you like to share a little story about Kali?
Well, this is a story I really like, because I find it very relevant on so many different levels, on personal levels, on couple levels, and worldly level. So Kali, this archetypal energy of passion, anger, and even rage, she has a place. And so the gods were fighting with demons. They were having a big, massive fights. And what the gods didn't know is that the demon, he had a boon that he couldn't be killed by a male. But the gods didn't know that. So they were fighting and they were losing, and they didn't know what to do. So they called Durga, who is also a fierce goddess, but she's more protective goddess. She has that fighting spirit, but she's a bit less fierce than Kali. And she was slaying the demons, but as she was slaying the demons, they were just multiplying. And so she thought, well, we have to do something here. We need something even stronger. And so she concentrated, and out of her forehead emerged Kali. And there she was. She was pissed off. She was angry. She was like, I'm not going to let this shit happen. And there she was. She slayed the demon, and she was victorious. But the thing is that in her activation, in a way of anger, but anger for good, she couldn't stop. She just couldn't stop. She had lost it, basically. She had completely lost it. And no one could stop her. And so the gods, they called Shiva. They said, hey, Shiva, come on. She's your wife. Do something. You got to stop her. She's gone completely wacko, as we say in Australia. Crazy. And so Shiva, he was trying to stop her. He was trying to do what she was doing. He was trying to talk to her. He was trying to, but she was unstoppable. So you know what he did? He lay down with his hands behind his head, very relaxed, his chest, heart, belly open. fully present. And when Kali stood on him, and I think she was about to slay him, but she met his eyes, she met his energy. He was receiving her fully for who she is. And in that moment, she remembered and she calmed down. She stopped. And I really love this story because it's full of symbolism and it gives us keys as well as women, because when we see something that's not right, we can feel that energy, that impulse. We want to do something, like, the children who are dying, who are starving, the injustices, we feel it in our heart, in our gut, because intrinsically, whether we have children or not, we are mothers, and we can't bear this kind of things. So because we are taught to behave and all that, we just repress, and then we get stuck and we don't know what to do. But the key here is the Shiva. Shiva represents consciousness, awareness, presence. So if we can be present to what we are feeling, we get the medicine from it. And if we need to take a particular action, then we can take it from a place of, more open-heartedness, or more settledness, or, less confusion, because anger isn't, we don't want to act on anger. It's not a good idea, but we don't want to repress what's happening. So this is I think a key for any kind of emotion. I think it's important to understand that as women, that we need to cultivate this Shiva energy. We need to cultivate consciousness, awareness, presence for ourselves. But also men who are attuned with their masculine essence have that naturally, and they have a certain power there that is healing. So I say men, but I want to say more the masculine energy. So for example, in a couple's relationship, whether it's same sex or if it's man-woman, these polarities are constantly dancing with each other. But like if the Shakti, the feminine polarity, it doesn't have boundaries, and it does a Kali kind of scenario like this one, well, the masculine polarity that has more presence can hold the space. Yeah, and so I feel that it's got lots of messages in this particular story, including, on the world level. We need to have that consciousness in order to be present with what's happening and with all the changes that we experience.
I totally agree with you, Nandini. I mean, that story, it changed my life because it taught me how to deal with my emotions, how to be present to my emotions. And I think this is a real challenge as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky enough, Nandini and I were sharing this, we had a pre-meeting last week, and I'm lucky enough to have a daughter who's in that threshold between leaving being a female child and becoming a female woman's body. And for those of us who've made that transition, we know that it's a really strong hormonal experience that, as Nandini was saying earlier, it's mysterious. It happens in the dark. Like, you don't get a guidebook or a kind of step-by-step what's going to happen. It's that your body allows you to feel emotions more strongly. And watching my daughter go through this experience, I felt really honored to see this channel. She became a channel for pure emotion. And I was imagining in a village, some idealized village thousands of years ago, this would be like a shaman role. When young women begin to channel pure emotion, this would be celebrated as and honored as a huge gift to the tribe that we're having humans capable of incorporating these pure emotions. And luckily, I had heard the Kali story when several years ago. And so I really allow my daughter to express her emotions freely. And I encourage her to just ride the wave of how she's feeling, and that no matter how strong it is, it's okay to express it, and that it will keep moving. That emotions are in motion. That's what they're doing. They're always moving. And going through this with another person helped me realize what I had gone through in myself as a young teenager was unfortunately to be repressed. Like, one shouldn't have tantrums or lose one's emotional poise. And also a lot of isolating. If you can't behave yourself, go to your room. And now looking back, I just see how it really doesn't give women the tools to deal with their emotions. Like, if you get ostracized for experiencing a strong emotion, no one's really helped you to. You've just been rejected from the tribe. All you want to do is get back in, and the only way to get back in, a little bit like we were saying about moving to Canberra, the only way to get back in was to become non-feminine, like become more masculine and even-tempered. So it's been a very beautiful experience to be with someone going through these emotions.
Yeah, I was going to say she's lucky because, we are actually so shamed for having different emotions.
One has to recognize, I personally, Kali is it for me. If I had a tattoo, it would be Kali. Like, I'm a devotee. But Kali's not attractive.
No,
right?
But she's necessary.
And I think that this is a challenge, isn't it, also for women, that culturally what is acceptable for women and what's attractive around being a woman, what's attractive about being feminine are the gentle things like being sweet, being patient, being receptive. They're all kind of, in the culture that I've grown up in, they're tick. Yes, those are good feminine qualities. But Kali qualities like being enraged for the righteous cause, that's not an attractive quality. And Kali has the skulls of hundreds of men's heads. She's wearing a necklace of skulls. She's got blood coming down out of her fangs and her mouth. So her hair is all disheveled. And we can accidentally give women the idea that being feminine is about being soft and attractive, which is one small component of being feminine. But culturally, we deny them an equally valid female outlet, which is rage.
Yes, but we also have to remember that Kali is always seen with Shiva.
She is, yes.
We want to keep that in mind, because let's imagine Kali without Shiva, without that consciousness and that awareness.
Yes.
I don't think the pure intention of the Kali energy could be fulfilled.
Yes.
Then it wouldn't be sustainable.
I love the image of Shiva lying before or underneath Kali, because I do find that there is a fear. I deduce this. I don't really know why it is, but from actions, it seems to me that there is a fear of female power.
Yes.
And you mentioned it in being attractive walking down the street. There's a fear of a woman being too sexual, a fear of a woman being too seductive, taking a man away from what he should be doing by seducing him, And then there's a fear of women's anger or crying. Some people can find if their mother cries, it's like the end of, it's like Armageddon, I really cannot exist if my mother is sad. So for me, the power of the Shiva position is for men or consciousness or whatever the Shiva is representing, to trust, to be vulnerable and open to the full experience of feminine wisdom and power, and stop moving. Don't run away from the woman who's enraged. Don't run away from the woman who's upset, but surrender, which is kind of a female quality.
If we talk about the Kali energy as pure Shakti, the creative feminine life force, in a way it's a bit like it is feared, that power, but also by women themselves, because, in certain situations, if we are in our full power, are we safe? So that Shiva consciousness and presence that we need to cultivate for ourselves give us that safety. So so I feel they're very important together. They're a good team.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because of this, I think this dynamic that it's in Vedic astrology. I'm sure it flows through Vedic philosophy and science, this association with female energy as being receptive and passive, which is a great strength of female energy. But this is what I kind of see with Kali, is that because a feminine energy is naturally receptive and naturally passive, it receives and it accepts and it's patient. And then there's a Kali moment where, it kind of like, to reclaim the balance, the expression has to come forth. And I think about it a lot with planet Earth, with Mother Earth, because we're in this environmental situation where one feels perhaps Mother Earth, planet Kali, is going to be the teacher that might help us wake up. Because one of the things when you study Vedic astrology right at the beginning, we talked about the signs are half and half. But what you notice with the planets is that we have the sun is masculine, we have Mars is masculine, and we have Jupiter masculine. So we've got these three beautiful masculine planets. And then we know that we have the moon is feminine and we have Venus is feminine. So we've got two. And then our other two planets, Saturn and Mercury, are both considered to be non-gender. And when you're first learning Vedic astrology, it's kind of noticed three masculine planets, two feminine planets. What's going on here? This is suddenly the balance is not really there. And then you realize that the most important planet in any astrological chart is the Earth. It's planet Earth. That's the ascendant in any chart. And that the Mother Earth it's always considered to be feminine. So when I think about Mother Earth and what's going on with the way that we exploit Mother Earth, is almost the perfect example of being receptive. She's here with resources buried underneath the soil, with nature that she's supporting that we can exploit. And with that active masculine energy, we're going around, using and buying and selling and creating things on the surface of the earth. And the planet Earth is kind of being receptive and receptive and receptive until that balance becomes unsustainable. And then I'm kind of expecting a bit of Kali action, a bit of retaking the impetus and creating some return to balance, but perhaps in a quite drastic way.
If we think about, Mother Earth, Bhumi, Gaia, as a living entity and an energy that, is part of us, is part of our collective, yes, definitely. And we are interconnected, and she's giving us some signs.
And so when you work with women, how do you help women know when it is to be receptive, when to accept, when to be patient, compassionate, and when to say enough is enough, when to come on to the front foot and set a boundary or correct some imbalances? How can women do that in a wise, feminine way?
The power that we have access to is when we are deeply connected to our bodies. And it's easy to disconnect from it, But it's also easy to reconnect, provided that we value ourselves enough to do the things that we need to do to reconnect. So I'm talking about practice, I'm talking about sadhana, or whatever it is. But we need to know what works for me. What's my thing? What's my go-to, so I can reconnect with my body? Because when we are connected to the body, and particularly for women, the heart space and the womb space, it's a lot easier to recenter and to be true to ourselves, to know what our desires are, what our yeses are, and what our nos are. And from there, we need to understand that we can value ourselves enough that when we mean yes, we fully mean yes. And when we mean no, we really mean no. And we can say no with an open heart. Ultimately, what everyone wants is to be connected, to be loving, to be true, to be present. And when we are in connection with other people, that's what we want. We want to feel that connection. But first, we need to feel the connection with ourselves. And that's the primary relationship. Because we value our heart. And there is wisdom in our heart. And our heart, when you're connected to your heart, to your womb space, you're connected to the earth. You're breathing with her. You're supported by her. It's when we disconnect with the body, with the earth, that we disconnect from ourselves, and we don't know what we want, what we don't want, and then one day we might just explode out of confusion or accumulation. I often say to my students that self-care is your secret weapon.
I love what you're saying, Nandini, because connecting to the body and connecting to the earth. And I think this is what Vedic astrology in some ways is trying to tell us with that balance of the planets, that we've got those more masculine planets. There are more masculine planets in the sky than feminine planets. So we need to connect to the earth in order to connect to the feminine. But in order to bring balance, we have to be grounded in our earth consciousness. And then there's equilibrium. But if we remain in the head, in the sky where there's more masculine planets, it becomes about doing and achieving and the outer activity, not the inner. And then you're picking up on something really that I did want to talk about, but you've encapsulated it beautifully, which is that when we look at the Shadbala of planets, the potencies of each planet, the female planets, when they are low in Chestabala, the moon and Venus, we don't value ourselves. We don't value ourselves. And I really wanted to speak to you about that, because I think there's something about giving birth and becoming a mother that one in some ways loses one's body. One completely shares one's body with another being for a time in order for that being's body to grow enough to survive outside. And then when you're giving birth, there's very much this feeling that you're a portal between the unmanifest and the manifest. But your body is essential for this process to take place, both the growing of the baby and then the feeding of the baby. And it's quite a confronting experience in some ways as a Westerner to give birth and feed a young baby, because they're completely dependent on your body, even though normally you would probably be recovering your body because you've just run a marathon of giving birth, perhaps 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours. You might have stitches, you might have lost a lot of blood and fluid, and you haven't eaten. You're tired, you've been awake for a long time. It's emotional because it was quite intense physical experience. And normally if that happened, you would be like, okay, world, like I'm in bed now. Nobody Nobody can expect anything from me now for weeks because I need to recover. But instead of that, there's a life that is dependent on you that will lose weight every day for at least the first week, maybe a little bit longer. Even as you're learning how to feed this baby, it's going to be reducing weight. And if you are not able to feed for some reason or neglect the baby, that life is hard to sustain. So there's this kind of enormous, one wants to self-care, like naturally, but the need to care for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think for many women, you tap into a superhuman feminine power that you just cannot believe what you can do, that you can give birth for so many hours and then immediately begin caring for a baby. And this is a wonderful thing. However, it can lead women to put themselves last, like that period of time that's quite intense, that is also incredibly empowering if things go well, if you feel like, wow, I can do anything. But it can leave us with this idea that our power comes from putting ourselves last, that if I look after everyone else first, I will always have the energy to give. And this is an amazing gift of being feminine. But at the same time, I love what you've brought in. And I think this is really important, that the female planets, when they are strong in Cheshtabala, Shadbala, they innately know how to value the self. And that when the feminine doesn't value the self, this is when abuse takes place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really complex, isn't it? This thing of being a woman, but being receptive, and yet at the same time valuing the self and self-care. It's all complex.
Yes. And it's very easy for us women to lose ourselves, whether it's with becoming mothers or in a relationship, in a romantic relationship. This is extremely common. Yeah, what you're describing is beautiful, and it's a very, very common experience. The key is really support, and I guess the societal structures have changed, that this support, the support of the village or the family, is not always present these days, because we have a bit of a different model. But that's I think that's also part of the empowerment of women, is to learn to create that support. We don't have to do it all by ourselves.
And that comes to the valuing thing that we've been talking about. So it's really, for me, that was one of the aspects of astrology I wanted to speak about. And I know we're talking, it's getting later and later, but I'd love to share another astrological aspect with you and get your take on it. One of my favorite yogas in Vedic astrology is when we have a great fortune yoga. It's called a Mahabhyagya yoga. And in a feminine chart, in a woman's chart, it is when the child is born at night, the ascendant is in a female Rashi, the moon is in a female Rashi, and the sun is in a female Rashi. And just quoting from core yogas here, it gives the person a greater ability to be receptive to the best possible situations and opportunities in life, due to those receptive qualities of the female signs, qualities of patience, contentment, tolerance, and feeling centered, as well as having discrimination. These things are noted. And inner happiness arises from good deeds and success if the ascendant, the sun, the moon, and the birth was at night. So I love this because it's like a feminine yoga. And occasionally you see it in a chart. But sometimes when I speak to women with that combination, actually it's like I give them permission to enjoy being perhaps a stay-at-home mother or a stay-at-home wife. And when I share this yoga, and they're like, oh, that's what I've always wanted to do, but I feel this pressure that I should have a university education. You know, women have sacrificed a lot for me to be able to be independent. I shouldn't get married. You know, I should make sure my career comes first. Do you find that the women that you work with, sometimes there's a disconnect between feeling okay about embracing those traditional feminine roles?
That's a great question. Before I answer that, I just want to emphasize the allowing, the giving permission. This is something that I experience all the time. They need to feel they have permission to be themselves with whatever that means. So, you know, I have some women who are, you know, very well-known business women, and some women who are mothers at home, but everyone wants to be allowed to be who they are, who they want to be. So I just wanted to emphasize that, as you said, when you allow them, they go like, yes, you know. But it comes back again to the valuing our desires, whether we want to be a mother at home or a CEO in an organization or whatever, you know, that it's equally valued. It's this, you know, you won't be less because of your choices. It's beautiful, you know, when a woman owns what she wants to be.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. You know, it gives confidence, and confidence is attractive.
Nandini, I could keep you talking all day, but the day is escaping us. Before we go, is there anything that you would like to share? Is there a reading that you wanted to share with us?
Yes, perhaps I want to share this reading from a tantric text called Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. The loose translation of the title is don't be scared. The terror and joy of realizing oneness with the soul. But this particular translator decided that to call that the Radiant Sutra, that because she said because it's so luminous. And the extract I want to share is so it's part of a dialogue between a god and a goddess, a couple, lovers, exploring and inquiring about how to enter into the vibrant essence of the world with the dual balance of both passion and detachment. In some yogic tradition, there's a lot about detachment, but then how do you combine this with being a householder, living in the West, or you're not a renunciate? And this kind of text that also give a lot of techniques connected to meditation. It's really not what you think it is when you open the pages. And I just want to read a little extract. So this is the translation of the Sanskrit that I'm reading. Eating dark chocolate, a ripe apricot, your favorite treat. Savor the expanding joy in your body. Nature is offering herself to you. How astonishing to realize this world can taste so good. When sipping some ambrosia, raise your glass, close your eyes, toast the universe. The sun and moon and earth dance together to bring you this delight. Receive the nectar on your tongue as a kiss of the divine. Wherever you feel carried away, rejoicing in every breath, there is your meditation hall. Cherish these times of absorption, rocking the baby in the silence of the night, pouring water into a crystal glass, tending the logs in a crackling fire, sharing a meal with a circle of friends. Embrace these pleasures and know this is my true body. Nowhere is more holy than this. Right here is the sacred pilgrimage. Live in alertness for such a moment, my beloved, as if it were your one meeting with the Creator.
I'm really thankful that you brought that in, although it's at the end, and now I want a whole other topic. But I'm really thankful that you brought that in because, again, for me, this plays a little bit to that fear that we have of embracing sensuality, that somehow the sensualness of life is a bad thing.
Mm.
And it's a bit sad, isn't it? Because it's such a pleasure to be here experiencing the senses.
For me, as someone interested in spirituality and all that, there was a point in my life where I had very strong sadhanas and meditation practices and all that. And I became a little bit immersed in that spirit of renunciation in some ways. But then I was wondering, how are you yourself, and also you maintain this aspiration for the divine, and for me, I really like the teachings of Tantra because it's the teachings of embracing. It's neither getting lost nor repressing. So the key is not to be attached, which does not mean not caring. It's different. So it's not clinging, and not resisting. It's like, well, it's there. We have a sexual energy. Let's use it well, Let's use it in a way that is conducive to connectedness, to openness, to enlightenment, not repressing. And we have seen in the world what it does. The repression of the sexual energy creates all kinds of deviations that create so much suffering. So I really like the path of Tantra, which Tantra is not, a lot of people associate Tantra with sexuality. It's the integration of masculine and feminine. That's what Tantra is. And I like this approach because it encompasses everything. It's embracing our emotions, our feeling, being present to it, not pushing them away, not clinging on to them either. For me, this is part of that all encompassing embrace. And in the beginning I was sharing my personal story around the craving, the yearning for the all embracing mother energy. Well, it's that all embracing. It's like nothing is left out, everything is included, everything is embraced into our essence.
I think that where sometimes we see in astrology, we have these particular aspects of planets spread out, the way that they look at each other or the way that they're located together in a sign. When do the feminine planets cause problems in these Lajatadya Vastas? And with the moon, it causes problems of making the person feel needy, or feel that if all of their needs could just be met through love, if I could just surrender completely into being held, we would call that the moon starving, depending on what planet it's affecting. And with Venus can starve Jupiter. And I think this is where we see some of this renunciation versus sensuality, which Tantra is saying that they're both at the same time. But where we see it in astrology is Jupiter can be starved by Venus because conceptually Jupiter is our contentment, the joy that comes from within. And Venus is the joy that comes from the outside, the sensuality and the experience of joy through the senses, through the body, can distract or starve Jupiter by making Jupiter always chase the end of the rainbow, that I will find contentment if I just, do this or do that or do this. And it's interesting because the masculine planets don't really starve the feminine planets in that same way. So I feel like this is, in some ways, there's a little bit of embedding here our concerns about how to be content when either that sensuality pulls at us or when the need for love takes us away from that contentment. So I love what you're bringing in, which is this path of Tantra, to embrace all.
Embrace all, and when joy flows in the body and in the heart, then we're on the right path.
Thank you so much for being so generous with your time today.
Thank you, Fiona, for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
And of course, I will be including the contact details if people would like to be in touch with Nandini. And this is a topic that I find really rich and interesting. So I hope that we'll get the chance to revisit it again sometime here on the Vedic Astrology podcast. Thank you for listening, everyone, and look forward to being with you next time we get together. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.